little subtle and very telling distinction regarding all of this kind of stuff. At least all the kind of stuff the way I've been talking about it. All these maps, new descriptions, sketches, hints, useful palaver. Just in the last few nights, little things like the description of ordinary life internally, ordinary intelligence, the life of the brain being like a mom and pop business, or the dreary backstage of all productions, and then the inference that you could take that as a metaphor for what everyone normally assumes to be some sort of nonverbal, unconscious, uncontrollable, unknown motivations running what would seem to be one's actual performance, one's personality. Or some of the past, even older, giving people what they put out, how to interfere with the normal energy flow, how to get people, as we say in the intellectual business, off your case, simply by treating people exactly, just verbally, and with a few little gestures, just imitate them right back. All such as this, you understand the simplistic, if they were privy to these tapes and found any interest in it, the more simplistic, very easily, predictably, if they were interested, would take these as being psychological tricks or tools that you could go out and use, which, for instance, in the case of giving people what they put out, many of you were here at a time when I gave it out as a kind of specific something to go do and to find out, in a sense, that was not the only reason, but in a sense, how absolutely predictable and mechanical are very simplistic aspects of human behavior that are taken to be otherwise. That is, if someone seems to be able to run intellectually roughshod over you, somebody who is so hostile that you cannot deal with them. And I pointed out that it's very simple to stop that. Just guaranteed. All you got to do is do an imitation of them. If that's the way they're dancing with you, and they will never do it. And they will not know why. They're helpless. And if it was simply a psychological gambit of some kind, or if the point was to bring out some sort of psychological theory or idea, I could say, I could describe it saying, well, here's what's going on. Psychologically, if you could limb most people's behavior, if you could do a quick verbal or even a lengthy verbal psychological profile of somebody. Let's take the example of someone who is very aggressive, someone who's very pushy. They deal with their employees, they deal with their peers at work, they may deal with their family on the basis of talking real loud and, God damn it, I told you to do so and so, and shape up. You could say that's their psychological profile, a thumbnail sketch. And then you could take my description of giving people what they put out and say the reason this works, I'm going off on a little side, it's not a tangent, but it's to try and sneak you back up on where we're going. I could have made a psychological description of this, an interpretation, and saying the reason it works is that each person subconsciously is giving out messages as to what drives and motivates them. Hence, thus, ergo, sleepy and dumb. Well. Ergo was one that never got, Disney wouldn't put up with ergo. That if it was a psychological description, we'd take, for instance, my example of someone who is aggressive and hostile. The reason that they treat other people aggressively and hostilely is because that's what makes them run. That if somebody says, hey, damn it, why don't you do so-and-so? Boy, it gets their attention. It probably went back to their childhood, and that's the way their family treat them, and so that's what drives them. And now that they've gotten a little older, they have adopted some sort of protective armor of personality, And they try not to let this show, but being victim to this kind of traumatic psychological straitjacket, they are left with feeling as though they've got no other recourse, that the way to handle people is to treat them hostilely. And why? Because someone treating them hostilely makes them jump, and so they assume, just being ordinary, that that works on everybody. And sure enough, blah, 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 blah. Remember, that's not the point we're getting to tonight. But it all fits. I could make a psychologist, any psychiatrist, go, yeah. Especially once if they had enough nerve to go try it, to find out it always works. And of course, it's not just hostilely. If there's somebody that you can't deal with that always whines and wrings their hands, and every time you try to get them to do something, they go, and they go into that. And the harder you push them, let's say that's an employee of yours or a family member, and you go, good grief, don't keep wringing your hands and whining to me. Just listen to me. I'm not trying to pick on you personally. You've got to do this. All right, the way to get their attention, the way to get them to stop that, is to do the same thing to them. Somebody's got to do this. All you got to do is do that. And if you can get your eyesight out of the spatial realm and into the temporal, because it's got to be like that, you'll see them and the hostile person, everybody, suddenly they'll go, they don't know why. But what happened is, it's like you have taken a DC current and reversed it, and nobody's expecting it. It's not part of the dance. It always works. It will get their attention better than a 2x4 on a mule. That's an old Freudian description, I think. It will get everyone's attention. All you've got to do is do an imitation of them. Just as crude, you do not have to go into the studio method or Stanislavski. Just look at the person. Just look at them. If they do something like, by God, listen to me, and they just lean over and just talk loud, even if you're not into gestures a lot, just do their voice when they come by and say, did you get that report yet? You know, what do you mean, what report? I told you I wasn't going to do Mole's report. Don't come asking me. Ask somebody else first. And it's not just that they believe, which you would if you were the type to be dancing backwards to somebody hostilely. It's not just that they think you're going to attack them. They don't know what happened. But what happened, so we can still stick with the psychological description, is that you are now using on them that which works on them, but they didn't expect it. It's reversing the flow of energy. And it will immediately get everyone's attention in a way that they don't even understand. But their whole energy system makes a nonverbal note, do not fuck with this person anymore. Don't deal with this person. Just strike them off the list as much as possible. The whiner will do it. Anybody will do it if you just do a crude imitation of them. Remember, this is still the preface. All of these things, if you simply take them as a psychological trick or a psychological tool even, if that's all you do, you are still in the realm of the simplistic. All of that was to try and offer a better, if not description, a stronger hint that some of you can already do, but I'm going to put some words, some sketchy verbal clothing on some of it, just sort of babbling at random, but I'll hit around certain areas that some of you have already had experience. You should be able to see that you are wielding this kind of information in a way that resembles neuralizing. It has to become a part of what's going into a new building site here. Not just a psychological tool, not just of taking, back to my example, of giving people what they put out, will stop their general mode of behavior. Whatever one it is that you have identified that you are having problems with, such as the hostile person or the whiner. If you were trying to use this as a psychological tool of some kind, and you were ordinary, that is, more simplistic, what would you try to do? If you did it once, and you found out, wow, that's magic. Or if in some way I convinced you through the force of my personality and striking good looks that you went, yeah, I'll try that. What would you try to do if you were most ordinary? Chances are this. You would try and repeat it to yourself. All right, I'll give people what they put out. I'll give people what they put out. Especially that old guy at work. I'll give him what he puts out. I'm going to have to remember this because I just know it works. Or you try it once and it works, and then you forget about it. Well, did I forget about it? Well, I didn't remember it. It's like I get around the guy again, and I knew how to do it because it worked once, and suddenly he hollered, hey, are you listening to me? And I was back into it. So what I got to do is I got to reinforce, I'll repeat it. And of course, throughout history, there have been all sorts of intellectual, spiritual, religious exercises, tricks that were based upon, or at least the method was based upon, repetition. That you've got to remember to do this or it won't work. You've got to tell yourself over and over, give people what they put out, give people what they put out. That's the simplistic. That's when you're missing it. That's why I'm bringing this up tonight. That is not it. Now it's all right to start out and play intellectual helper, an extender, for a few times. But that is not it. Because that is still at the old building site. That is you attempting to laterally deal with the level of intelligence of where your brain is now operating. Not that it won't work, because it'll work even if you're from Dumas, Texas, pronounced in some areas as dumbass. But don't do it in the area of Texas, by the way. Even if you're that simplistic, it'll still work. But you're going to miss the more complex possibilities if you just take it as being some sort of trick. And I mean trick in a full sense of the word, not in any pejorative sense, that it's just a tool, it's something that works, and so you just got to remember to do it, got to remember to do it. It is closer to neuralizing. It is closer to a reality that is now on a new building site that doesn't actually talk out loud. It is not you saying, well, we're all just almost entertainers, that what we see on our face, what appears to be the personality that we all deal with each other, is sort of like a performance on a stage, but we all got a backstage, and so I got to remember that. You ain't got to remember that. If you got to remember that, it's not going to do you any good. Because if you got to remember that, then you got to work at remembering that, and you're going to end up to varying degrees, one way or the other, repeating. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you. Blessed be Allah. Blessed be Allah. Give people what they put out. Give people what they put out. That is simplicity itself. That will not move intelligence. That will not ignite the brain past where it is now. The description, the several I've given of neuralizing, just the word I made up, for those of you that never heard it, don't worry, I just made it up. It almost sounds like it means something, but it's not in the dictionary. But what I mean is, there is a way that you can be aware of something without remembering it. And when you wear that one out, there is a way that you can remember something without thinking about it. There is a way that you can think about something without handling it. There is a way that you can think about something without telling yourself. There is a way that your own nervous system can bring up, but it's in a new spot. It's not the old place. It starts out there, but it's like something happens, and the voice in your own nervous system, in your own brain, will say, give people what they put out, and it's almost as though you can look away so fast that you didn't hear it. That is, I am not driven by some kind of dumbass repetition. I am not a Catholic or a Muslim. I am not playing with prayer beads, and I am not going, got to remember to do this, got to remember to do this. Don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. You'll die, you'll die, you'll die. Thank you, God, thank you, God. Even if that starts out the basis of it, you're getting somewhere close to neuralizing. If you can hear what I'm saying, it's like you hear that for a second, but it doesn't actually speak out loud because you can turn away so quick that you're aware, but you don't say it. It wants to say it. Nothing spooky about it. Your own brain. That place where you are plugged into the ordinary flow of life. That is running this kind of energy that talks. And the ordinary people, of course, take it as being, sad to say, amazing to say, themselves. But once you find out that there are areas of your brain that are all like a real building site, but somebody has swept it up. There's no debris there. Of course, there's no nothing there. But you can stand over there and you can hear them talking over there in the project. You remember the project where the fence, nobody knows what the project is except the fence gets higher and higher. And people go in and out. What is the project? The project may just be the project. But you can stand over there and you can hear stuff that you need to know going on behind the fence over there. But then at this new building site, if you, let us say that you have some way your own dialogue now going at the new building site. It's a leap of faith, just trust me verbally for a second. It's like you can hear stuff going on behind the fence, and then at this new building site with these two brand new virgins, not virgins, virgins, unsalad, intellectual dance, you with yourself. And you hear something over there that you need to hear, and it's like you can almost say, did you hear that? But before you can even say, did you hear that, you turn away. And you realize, well, I'm not going to answer anyway, even if I heard me. Did you remember to do that? But before you can even finish, you look away. And you're aware of the fact that you're going to pretend you didn't hear yourself. And don't say you can't do it, because if you can't do that, what can you do? You mean you cannot fool yourself? You cannot say, I didn't hear that. Or somewhere in your nervous system says, well, all right, starting tomorrow, I will never have another drink again, or I'll never smoke, or I'll never get mad. As long as you listen to that crowd, you're going to listen to that crowd. You keep dancing. You stay in the same place. Oh, you can move around. You know, if you find one area of the dance floor over here better than this area, it's okay. But all you're doing is spinning around and around. What you've got to be able to do is almost to hear it and not to hear it. Almost to hear it and won't admit you hear it. And don't let your ordinary self say, well, wait a minute, that ain't going to work, because if you hear it and then pretend you don't hear it, that doesn't count for anything. If you don't understand that counts for everything, I repeat again, I'm not sure what you're doing here. Well, wait a minute, you can't just fake stuff. Well, now that I brought that up, that is interesting, isn't it? Because with ordinary people, they're telling the truth. When they say, well, wait a minute, you just can't fake. You just can't say, well, I didn't hear me say that. I mean, you just can't do that. Notice, only the ordinary part of anybody will say that. And remember, local reality contains every possibility. Anything is possible locally. And so if your local reality, your own old intelligence says, well, you can't do that, you're done for. Because there is no one to naysay that. Once you say, well, you can't do that, you're right. Unless you can hear yourself say, you can't do that, and you look away and go, Another possible verbal hint toward neuralizing, which is all a quite mechanical, not in the sense it's automatic, but in the sense that it is sensual, it is physical, it is the operations of your own brain. It is nothing spiritual, it is nothing metaphysical, it is nothing transcendental by any of the ordinary definitions. It is simply a new operation of the human brain that a few people can do. That a few people's always been able to do. For what reason? You know, who knows and who cares? The only people who care are those that can't do it. And they end up writing books about it and lecturing about it. Well, so I hear. I don't know. There is a way to look at the neuralizing, I was going to say again, it is like almost a new force backstage. But a new force now. And it's like a new area of backstage, the new building site, where you can almost prompt and give new, may I suggest, even unusual stage directions off there backstage to what seems to be going on out here. But it has to be new. It can't come from the old backstage area. It can't come from the old building site, from the old project. If we call somebody attempting to do this again a real explorer, let me point out that a real explorer would have absolutely no interest, no love, no anger in his old original backstage. I mean, any more than Columbus would have any interest in Venice. Not negative, not bad, but if you're going off and sail, if you're going off and do something new, and you're going to carry around your home port, your own backstage forever, why in the hell did you try to leave home for? Why even bother to try to go on a vacation, much less an exploration, if you've got any real ties to backstage, to the original homeland? There's no way to simply say, well, I won't do it. But there is the distinct possibility that you can recognize that the human nervous system is driven to, as they want to say, dream, speculate, fantasize, imagine what it might be to be somewhere else, to be somebody else, to operate in a different way, to think in a different way. But if you begin to see that even that is still tied directly to your own local, already established reality within you, and that your dreams are not free, that your flights of fancy don't fly very far, that your flights of fancy are in a real teeny-weeny little bird cage, and that's as much as they may seem to flutter their wings now and then, but as soon as they try to take off, they hit the wall, they hit the cage, and nobody ever notices it. Why would you have any interest? And remember, I'm trying to get you to see, not positive, not negative. I guess it would really be beyond uninterested. It would be disinterested. No feeling one way or the other. No interest in your old backstage. There is nothing there. There is nothing to be attacked. There is nothing to be cherished. There is nothing to even look at except dust, darkness, garbage, and I don't mean psychological traumas. I mean all the kinds of things that out front the performers think, well, I don't want to fool with this. That's the kind of thing that gets me on the stage every night, is realizing back here how dull, how uninteresting it is. Let's see if we can pull in a few more things from the last few tapings. You do recall, it was pointed out, that the losers gain the most, benefit the most from the war, because what they get is something to remember. What they get is something to talk about. See if you can extend your thinking on that into a little more specific area. The losers gain the most because it is they who develop a retelling mystique about the war. Never the winners. It is only the losers in the war. There are two aspects to this that develop a mystique, a whole fairyland, a dream world of what happened. Only they. The winners, it never happens. The victors, there is no mystique. There are no stories. There are no culturally supportive tales about what they did and their valor. The losers, that's the one aspect. The other one is only the losers that develop not just a mystique, but a retelling mystique. That is, they continue to talk about it. Whereas the victors normally show almost no endogenous volition to talk about it, unless they're asked about it, unless it's brought up. But the losers, All you've got to do is sort of cough. And they'll say, oh, would you like to hear about the war? No, just immediately go into it. Now, could any of you, I will be hoping that was established enough, because I'd already hit a piece of this exemplary wise before when I was pointing out in our part of this world, in the last 150 years, was the so-called Civil War, the war between the states, or whatever they're calling it nowadays down here. And I was pointing out a prime example that many of you seem to hit, that the Union, the Yankees, there's no mystique. In Southern literature, folklore, walking around socializing down here, people just, again, you just kind of cough and somebody say, oh, well, yes, my grandfather did fight with General so-and-so, and they burned down our homes and took all of our cattle or whatever. And enough of you laughed, I assume that you did get some feel of that. But that is true everywhere. So do we have that much established? It's the losers, even if we were talking no more than psychologically, sociologically, if we were just discussing actually what appears to go on out there in life. Which, of course, we're not. But if we were. But now, can you take that reality, and not just internally? First, let's take a more swampy ground somewhere between here and the sticks. STYX. Between the river. Could you see the losers being the only ones that have a retelling mystique regarding the war? Could you see that as being any way connected with man's ordinary talk? Oh, I know you want a hint. All right. How about the news? And how the news seems to be just with almost no exceptions, seems to be in some way tied to negative news, bad news. It's not some plot on the network's part. It's not some Eastern liberal establishment conspiracy. It's always been true. Look at history. But what seems to be news even right this second, what is it? Can you not see any connection? That even something just happened 30 minutes ago, now we go live to our news team over at such and such locale where such and such has just happened. And what's the news going to be? It's enough for some people to say, well, it's probably going to be bad news. That's all they report. Yeah, but wait. It's going to be a retelling of the mystique of lost battles. What is crime? What is murder? It is even true, apparently, man vis-a-vis natural disasters. That real nice earthquake they had lately, out there on the left side of the continent. When they report it, what are they reporting? It's man retelling. Although it may just happen, but they're still talking about it. It still makes the nightly news. Something's going on. How long it's going to take to rebuild. How many people should have gotten killed that didn't. How many people got killed that shouldn't have because we didn't have the buildings and the infrastructures. What are they reporting? They are retelling the mystique of man lost the battle with an earthquake. Man lost the battle with a tornado, with a hurricane, with just a flash flood. It is a constant retelling in some way, and I mean this for a reason why I keep saying mystique. It's not just retelling bad news. That's one way you start out looking at it, but that shouldn't take you over a few minutes to realize, if you can do it sang-froid, that bad news is history. Bad news is news. But now more into the chemistry of it, more into the energy that is running through humanity for life's own purposes. There is a kind of total mystique that when you apparently And I'm trying to get you to see all the way from the individual level to all of humanity, or at least all of humanity, that in one locale, Charleston, West Virginia, is almost wiped out, suffers severe damage from Hurricane Hugo. The retelling, forget, well, we're interested, forget all that. Can't you see that it is collectively, let's say that this whole group of Charleston, which is not this simple, we're having to cut up reality again into Act 1 and Act 7, Scene 2. Just jumping in and arbitrarily doing it. But we would say Charleston is reporting the mystique of a lost battle. Then you could say that the ABC network, anytime that they're reporting on it, they are now part of the retelling of the mystique of a lost battle. And then individual, it is down to the point of I've been assaulted. It is down to, may I refine it for you more, the mystique of losing battle is man's concern with the continual reports, the great amount of space taken up in the media and human conversation talking about what? Health! Because there is the ultimate losing battle. And what do people talk about continually? And of course I assume some of you have already carried this on a little bit. Death. That men love to talk about death, dream about death, write poetry, wring their hands, imagine all sorts of potential scenarios that may occur. But what are they doing? They are retelling the mystique of a losing battle. This one just hasn't happened yet spatially. But it might as well, because everyone knows I'm going to die. Oh, I don't want to talk about it. Well, let's talk about it. To even say you don't want to talk about it is a retelling of the mystique. Like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I get the blues to even think about it. I don't know. At least you think I went off in a real give me the blues area. How about this? If talking about health and death and writing about it would be probably the most common area of human talk and literature and news reporting, then probably second, we'll pretend, second would be love. But can you hear what is written about love? What do people talk about love? It is still a retelling of the mystique that love will turn on you, that love is transitory. True love that you would almost die for, is still probably as ephemeral as the stock market. That's all the songs, the literature, the poetry of how much I love so-and-so, my Evangeline, my Brunhilde. They'll write about it, but now you should know by now, if you read down far enough, the poet, even if he says, my whole life has changed, my whole life revolves around so-and-so, somewhere down that poetry, somewhere in the novel, somewhere in people talking, is going to be, yeah, I know someday she's going to either look at me and go, God, you're ugly, I just realized it. I met a younger guy. Or someday she's just going to die, and then what'll I do? In other words, love will turn on you. Love is a, if I may quote that other great Crescent City philosopher, Alan Toussaint, love is a losing battle. Wrong, is Dr. John. Sorry. Don't like to mislead people. That's right. That love is a losing battle. It is the mystique continually of lost battles, even those that apparently are in the future, like your death. No one talks about victories. No one talks about triumphs. That is not the way life is wired up. Now, this does not mean, for you people getting this on tape, maybe it's the first time seeing this, this does not mean that the apparent fission and dichotomy of things either being good or bad or negative or positive, that doesn't mean that that's the limits of it. I'm just saying what appears to be on the ordinary, logical, serotine surface of how life seems to flow. That which seems to be the heart of human conversation is about a mystique of losers. Because in the battle between you and trying to stay alive, everyone loses. In the battle of you trying to stay healthy, it's a losing battle. Oh, you may be able to stall it around 70 years, but you know it's strictly a stalling tactic. You're just throwing sandbags up to the flood. Death is just running over the levees. You and Two Slant and Dr. John, all of us are going to have to run for it because there's not enough sandbags. They'll finally just overflow and death goes, aha! Of course, then maybe there is a ordinary life after death, and then you can think about all the tales they'll have then about what death was about. The mystique of it. See if you can follow this connection. There was a report. Let's make it interesting. On TV. There was a report on TV. It was in another place. And these people dress up and they play redoing war games. Well, let's see. We'll say it was in Belgium. It's these people who seem to be rather sane. They dress up, and some of them in gray uniforms and some in blue, and they redo the American Civil War, and they do training and all this, which has been going on for years and years and years and years, those of you who don't know it. Then this little report, after saying about the way they spend money, and they take their whole vacation to go out to replay these wars, these actual battles. Then they turn around, and here's a guy standing around looking, and turns out that he was a professional soldier, now retired, from the Belgian army. And he's looking at these people, and they can't resist, and they stick a mic in his face, and he says, "Can you believe that people pay money, people get together and pretend to be soldiers?" And I can look at some of these people. We don't have a draft over here anymore in Belgium, so I know that these guys, plus their age, have never been in the service. They've never been in boot camp. They've never been in battle. They don't even know the trials. They don't even know the irritation of being in a peacetime army, much less a wartime, but they don't know anything. How in the world can they enjoy this? That can't be fun. End of quote. But tut, 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 tut. It's always fun to be able to pretend, to play at being something that somebody else has to be. All right. Since enough of you heard something before we go on, let me redo that one. The guy says, take that as being a fair spokesman for ordinary intelligence, which it should be, which it was. For this guy to go, good God, people are coming out here spending money, buying uniforms to go out there, and they talk about it's fun to pretend to be a soldier. I was a professional soldier. That ain't fun. And I said, hey, not only can it be fun, it's always fun. Here comes the second version. It's always fun to pretend, to play at being something that somebody else has to be. Dash, including you. Now. The first part was all right. We could have stopped there if not enough of you had gotten it. All right, so right quick, I'll wipe out the first part so we can get on to the real stuff. It is always fun. People go out and pay money to go into an ersatz spring training camp. Surely some of you know this, or let's see if there's a female version of something that women do. They're not that, I started to say dumb as men. I hate to offend men, but who cares? Anytime that you can go pretend to be something, assume that it doesn't matter what, that you were wired up to be interested in it. Maybe if they had something that you could pay somebody and they'd put on sort of faux fashion shows, and a woman could go and you could go pay money. You had to pay them, and they'd let you wear a new, Saint Laurent, whatever, one of the new dresses, and you play like doing a premier fashion show. And you pay them $1,000, and you get to hang around the models all day, and they show you how to walk and how to vogue it, and you get to do all that, and you would pay money, and then the models stand back there, do it for a living. Of course, whoever's running this and charging you would tell the models, keep your damn mouth shut. Don't you be laughing at these people paying the big money. But you do know that they'd go backstage and go, you know, they just barely pay me enough, $100 an hour, whatever they get, to do this kind of crap. And these people are paying $1,000. The rest of you know that these people out here, you know, these housewives are paying $1,000 to come up here today and hang around us. And they would say to themselves, why? You know, I have to do this. This is my job. This ain't fun. This can't be fun. It's always fun. That's the only reason they would pay it. They're not dumb. They're no dumber than people that did it for a living. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, the guy that was in the service for 20 years, and he's saying these guys are dumb. They come out paying money to come on the weekend and play soldier. Boy, is that dumb. And if you don't use your brain just in the ordinary sense, whereas he come off calling them dumb, he spent 20 years there. They just came back and paid a little money, and they did it on the weekend. Plus, they get tired of things, say, you know, hell with this and leave. And maybe demand their money back. So it's always fun if you can pretend, if you can just go out and play at being something else that somebody else has to be. That's always fun if you're interested in it. Don't explain why. If you're interested, it's fun. All right, now, let's get on to the real part. Including yourself is to play being yourself. Since you've got to be down at the ordinary level, you've got to be just as much as this guy that spent 20 years says, well, I had to be a soldier. Once I got in there, I had to. It wasn't any kind of plaything. I had to, all right? Everybody, Gottlieb and Grunhilde and Fred and Mary, has got to be Fred and Mary. But it's always fun. See, now Fred and Mary, the same way as that general, same way as the models, they say this is not fun. This is work. Sometimes it's a pain. I wish I had never gotten into this, but it's too late to back out. I'm too old. Nobody can back out of being Fred and Mary. Not ordinarily. So to them, it is not fun. Well, some days are better than others, and etc. We all know that. But they can't say, well, this is fun. But it's always fun if you can pretend, if you can just play like. Just play act. Play at being somebody else and being what somebody else has to be. If you can play at being what you has to be, straighten out the English yourself, that is always fun. Not sometimes fun, not maybe fun. It's always fun. Always. I mean, if you don't have fun, don't do this, because it'll make your brain smile. Anytime you do it, you don't have to worry, will it be as much fun this time? It is always fun. But now, I'm trying to narrow it down. Skip the part about imitating somebody else. That's one way to start. You can look at that as, again, another kind of hamburger helper for your brain. But the real one is not play acting like somebody else. That could be a secondary activity. Might be a fun hobby. No problem. But if you want the real brain smile, it's to play like, it's to pretend to be the you, that is, the you that has to be you. It's pretend to do it. That is the fun. Always, no exceptions. You can't do it and not have fun. It's always fun. Always. Can't you hear the fun in my voice doing it now? No, edit that out. You could, or I could, say in the future a real explorer would be running his everyday performances as necessary. That is, a soldier got to be a soldier, Fred's got to be Fred, and me's got to be me. So you got to run your performance as is necessary, but you could be being prompted by new backstage directions and activities, which would then turn this into a new act. Now, if, again, you were falling into the crude, devious hands of ordinary thought and taking this as being psychological, it would be really, ultimately useless. It might seem to be interesting, because ordinarily you cannot pretend to be you. Ordinarily, what people are trying to do is to cease being them. That everybody realizes, and I am in some way lame. I am not perfect. Life is not exactly right, and it's our duty to change it, to try and do our best for me to at least improve myself. Instead of your energy going there, when I say that if the performances were being run by you backstage, I shouldn't really have to say, if you had any glimpse of it, that the prompting would now be new prompting or new directions. It would always be, but not on the basis of changing the performance. Well, I cluttered that too much. You see the difference, that here's the performance out front, that you are Fred and Mary and you're doing whatever Fred and Mary has to do. Has to do. There it is. It's not trying to change that, which is ordinary attempt to change, which is the ordinary frustration, which is the ordinary irritation, which is the ordinary running of everyday life. If you don't attempt to change anything, it's just backstage you're shouting out new prompts, new directions, and the same thing may apparently be going on, and oftentimes it will be. Same thing going on, except now the energy behind it is pretend. You're just paying your money to pretend to be you. Maybe give it a little added goose here and there. Even maybe other people don't notice it, but what you're doing, at least you know it, and it's always fun. I repeat again, always fun, is to just sort of overdo yourself. You begin to sort of do a real subtle, you don't have to take far, you just begin to do just a small little satire of you. Now you gotta admit, I do not guarantee much, but it's always fun. I give you that guarantee. Always fun. And of course, for those of you that like bad news, almost impossible to do. There, are you glad? And well, all right, if you're ordinary, it's impossible, not just sort of. Because if you're ordinary to begin with, you'd hear such as this and go, my God, the man's insane. Or maybe you'd take more of the load on you and go, my God, if I did that, it'd drive me insane. In other words, that sounds real serious. What do you mean pretend to be you? Can't do that. Or if you could, well, you can't do it to begin with, but if you could, my God, it'd wreck your psyche. I mean, after all, I've already spent 8 years in analysis, and if I did something like that, what might happen? I don't know. I'll have to check with my analyst. How about another little piece to pick up something? You recall the last time we were taping, and it was noted that rather than looking, which you can use at times though, as rather than just simply looking at much of what goes on in life as being, in human life, as being life itself, going, hey, look over here, and then picking your pocket. That kind of ruse, that kind of flam-flam. That you could look at it a little more specifically on the basis that the human receiving mechanism, the intellect, is always in a state of expansion. It is not a cul-de-sac. It is not a deed done. It is not a work of Sony or Panasonic that is ready for the market. It is not a receiver once and for all to get the full spectrum of the information available. So you can look at it that way. And I was pointing out that as long as that was true, you are left with, under all ordinary conditions, finding everything, if you look at it long enough, to find every little thing eventually becoming ironic. That everything appears to be in conflict with itself, that everything appears finally, even things that you started out absolutely convinced of, sooner or later, the great demon of ambiguity will get you, and you don't know. All right, that's just to bring us up to date from last time. I was going to give you a primo giant economy size example, and we went through a handful last time. But here is one that just continually pops up, and they did it for years and years with alcohol in history. But now, since we're living here, thank God, in the grand and glorious days of the drug culture, now they use it with drugs. And it goes like this, that life drives voices of authority, voices of apparent insight, serious voices in society that denounce others who would prefer to live in, and then there's some kind of quote like this, these other folks who would prefer to live in some sort of artificial, chemically induced, that is drugs, fairyland, other than to live in reality. Now if you want to talk about look over here, because what you have got is an absolute tacit denial, just a blindness, a denial that the chemistry of the brain of everybody is human reality. For you people on tape at some other time in some other place, this is not any encouragement to go take drugs. But do you hear? It is again on the surface. If what you're dealing with is your own local reality, and that you are being you, as you're supposed to be, which is, of course, being serious. And we all know the dangers of drugs. At least we know the dangers of drugs, that people taking drugs might run into your car, or might come up and want to wash your windshield, or might want to hold you up. So we know that. And so there you are sitting, and here comes the Surgeon General of the United States. Dr. Fishbein, I believe by name. But here someone points out that we have got to do something. We've got to extend the education. We've got to get to our children sooner in life, because something is drastically amiss in our society. Our culture is running amok. When we have people, millions of people, little children, teenagers, and then grown people, college education, good jobs, but people who would prefer to go into some sort of chemical never land, just some kind of chemical illusion, rather than to stand up and be a real person, a man or woman, and deal with reality. Do you hear that? And if you're ordinary, you're supposed to go, yes. Yes. They prefer to fool around with artificial, chemically induced dreams and fairylands rather than to, by God, live with reality. Human reality is one thing. Chemistry. Doctor, don't bother to answer. It is the giant economy, save yourself a lot of money, size example. And it's always been around. As I said, they did it with alcohol, they did it, people getting godly induced, that people were trying to fall into some other lapses of another mode of reality that was not, by God, based upon reality. And life will just not allow even the ordinary run of intellectual people to go ahead and say chemically induced reality, because then whatever life is up to right now in regards to this, the sentence would make Bertrand Russell gag to say we have people who now would prefer, these weak people prefer to live in some kind of chemically induced fairyland rather than live in chemically induced reality. No. Wait, no. So you can't do that, because based upon the general combined local reality of human intelligence now, they know that's true. You can take it down individually and talk to somebody specifically and say, wait a minute. Now, every sense, if we're going to call reality what you're saying reality, is the kind of reality where people probably take no drugs at all, unless it's prescription drugs, yeah, and they have to, yeah. They probably don't drink, or if they do, you know, maybe a glass of wine. Well, yeah, yeah. But you still know that reality is just the operation of your brain chemically. Well, yeah. And that's it. They can say, yeah, yeah. It's not an attack on life. I'm not trying to point out the ironies and incongruities of life. But can you begin to see that if you want to talk about an ultimate irony, at least a contemporary example, then I'd have to say about this one, what? To condemn drugs, which is not the point of me bringing this up, but to condemn drugs simply on the basis that what it does is artificially, chemically, alter your sense of reality, when real men and women, serious people, have got to stay straight, sober, and deal with reality. They're saying deal with the chemically induced local reality that is by and large the bell curve here at our time and place. That you have got to be middle class, you've got to be in the mode of local reality that by and large matches the prevailing one. But it is still one thing. It is chemically induced. It is chemical reality. There is no other reality. That's it. Yeah, but I don't want an artificial one. Okay. I want the real thing, which would be, well, what's your name? Fred. All right. I want the Fred reality. Well, we got a couple of minutes. Now we're talking about ironies, and I was pointing out some more. Now there's one more that I didn't mention last time that some of you may like, that you may already know. Does anybody remember the story about the Greek that was so, this way the story goes, some of you probably read it, but that was so enamored of the idea of being historically remembered, and he seemed to have no talent, no ability, that what he did was burnt down that wondrous temple at Artemis, if you remember, and then rushed up immediately and admitted it. Went and grabbed the judges and the guards, and now they remember because it was supposedly one of the great structures of the time, and yet every time reference is made thereto, the burning down, they never mention his name. I don't even know what it is, but I know the story because he admitted it immediately. While it was still burning, he rushed to tell them, I did it, I did it. And so it is remembered. Well, the part we're not going to, boy, I got to talk fast, 2 minutes. I didn't bring it up just for that. But when you're faced with that, ordinary intelligence is left with having to go back and refer to some vague attempted explanation based upon less than full reception of data, and they have to fall back on such things as, well, all right. And then they got to start laughing back to gods. Like, well, this is the gods' retribution for people acting that way. Don't you see that? That the guy, it was such an unseemly act to tear down, to burn down a temple. Not only a beautiful architectural thing, but it was made for the gods, and so he wanted to be remembered, at least in an infamous sense. And throughout history, people say, well, there's the son of a bitch that burned it down. And so they remember that some son of a bitch burned it down, but history, the gods saw to it that history forgot his name. Ha ha. That's still, if you got any real intellect, that's still unsatisfying. It's illogical. It's ironic. But it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't tell you how life is working. And it's either that or to fall back, if it's not on that kind of thing, it would be on the basis that psychologically people in some way do themselves in, that bad people will pay for it, when that's not true. When people know that's not true, but they can take a local example, one example, and the potential analyzation of how did this happen always ends up at the very least being ironic. But it is always, if you can see it in a wider scope, it is always unsatisfying.